accepted at the bronze level of the program. The reflection was a huge success, and we have their current Enviro School leaders here with us today to tell you more about their mahi work that they undertook leading up to their reflection.
We are really proud of Always Marshbush Stuart and Papa Artify looking after our environment.
Big voice.
Talk to me way over here, because I can't tell the time apparently. Nor can I hear, so speak nice and loud, please.
We are really proud of all the ways Marshbush is showing our values. To Papa Artify looking after our environment. Here's an example of one of our bigger projects. In 2021, we decided to make our own mahi. We found out that Marshbush used to be all bush like Carbush. Nobody lived here, but Māori would come to stay for short times to hunt and gather resources.
We were wondering how we could plant the Kahikatea tree at Marshbush School. The Kahikatea tree is part of our school work and is also our called the active planner.
We wanted to make our own mahi. The whole school went to Southern Community Nursery. We found out we needed to plant lots of plants that would provide ground and cover before we could plant native trees. We planned what the Ngāhere could look like and found out more about the plants and trees we would need. The whole school worked together to plan different parts of the Ngāhere. We designed pathways and created kaika, the huts Māori used to use when they visited. The Enviro leaders had the opportunity to use harakeke repurposed from the roadside to start our planting. We had a blessing to recognise that Tāne Mahuta would be guardian of our Ngāhere as it grows big and healthy.
People in our community helped us create our kuru pathway. Every student helped with planting of our Ngāhere. It was so exciting. We decided we wanted to create a special entranceway that would tell a story about our place. Kawaka investigated ways to tell a story and found out about po whenua, which are carved wooden posts used by Māori to mark places of significance. They can be found throughout New Zealand.
With the help of Whāia Wiki, we designed 4 tall po whenua, each telling a story about Marshbush School. Along with the po, each student and kawaka created their own tile with its own special design. That is an important part of our entranceway as well. The po were made by some awesome Marshbush parents in consultation with our Māori whānau Mahitahi group. The colours that align with our school logo were chosen to paint our designs.
In August, we had a special unveiling of our po and our awesome entranceway. It was at dawn on Masariki. It was really special.
We have other projects at Marshbush School too. We recycle paper in our classrooms. We reuse food scraps to feed a local kuni pig Poppy. And we compost on our roof. We look after school sheep and we have school chickens that lay eggs too.
We are so lucky we have Carbush nearby. Carbush is a special piece of native bush. Has been saved from being homes or farmland. We want to protect the bush and get rid of all the pests and weeds in Carbush.
Rara and Marta have been visiting Carbush each week. They are getting to know it very well and have noticed all the sycamore seedlings. What do we do with sycamores, kids?
Pull them out! In 2022, we had a school production that was all about being guardians of Carbush. The costumes we wore in our school production were of Ruru, Piwakamoka and Rusa.
We also have our tunnel house outside gardens for growing vegetables. We have a bee-friendly flower garden that students have helped design and we will look after. Thanks to Anna Thompson for helping us with our gardens.
There are more projects happening too. Kawaka are looking at ways we can use up citrus peels. They have great ideas for our lunch waste too.
There are so many more things to do to help our environment. Here are some of the things we want to do next.
Set up better weed control in our Ngāhere. Create seating in our Ngāhere.
Recycle plastics in Marshbush. composting to help our gardens, have litter-free lunches, reuse, recycle, reduce, repurpose, reharm, and rot.
Thank you for inviting us to tell you about our Baltic fiction today in Enviro School Market. We are very proud of our work.
Thank you very much, team. Firstly, my apologies for being not in the right place at the right time this morning. That's my worst nightmare, actually. So I got it over early in the year. Thank you very much. I'm still inspired and amazed, and I've heard you speak before. I'm a little disappointed you're not wearing your costumes today because they were fantastic. I think that's probably the best start to a strategy and policy meeting that we could ever hope for, and I hope that you have set a trend and that we'll get lots of other young people to come and tell us the amazing things that they're doing. Special thanks to the staff at Morris Bush and the whānau supporters, yes. And also our staff, Enviro School staff who work with you really hard. So thanks very much for making the effort to bring them in. I'm wondering if anybody's got questions of staff or students. Councillor Guyton.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. Hey, that's really great. Nice presentation. It sounds like you're doing fantastic stuff. I've got two questions for you. The first one is, are you getting any kai out of your ngahere? That's a good answer. I appreciate that. But I'd like you to think that it is possible. You can grow native food in there. The second thing is, as you get older and more expert at what you're doing, and you'll go on to a high school somewhere, I presume, are there going to be opportunities in those high schools? Like, do you know if there's Enviro School action at the high school that you might be going to go to? I mean, you don't want it just to stop here, do you? You want to do it the rest of your life, I presume. Do you know what's ahead?
We don't really think it's just our school.
Something to work on though.
Yeah, something to think about.
And what we can bring from what we've learned at Morris Bush into the high schools that they're going to across town.
And Councillor Guyton, we certainly have relationships with likes of James Harvest, so some of the planting within Waikato, that might be one of the feeder schools, and also Southland Girls would do.
Great. That's good. Thank you very much, guys. Nice work.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Morrison, please.
I had two questions. First question was, how did the chickens get on over the summer break? They all good?
They went to one of the teachers' house.
Oh, cool. So they're back again. They're all.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the second question I had was, you were doing so much stuff last year. Of the things you've got planned for this year, for 2024, what is the most exciting things or thing that you're looking forward to for 2024? You reckon?
I don't really have any plans. Maybe work from last year some stuff.
Yeah. So taking the now head forward.
Yeah, because the park's getting covered with all the weeds. So we're going to now.
Awesome. Thank you.
Any other questions from councillors? Councillor McFarlane.
Yeah, great to see you guys here and the work you're doing tonight. For us old people around the table here, some are older than others, of course. It brings hope for the future, and you're our future leaders. And when you're dealing with all these environmental problems and trying to fix what the past has done, and looking ahead, that I think it's going to be a lot easier. Learning the skills you guys have now for the future to make those decisions, and maybe one day you guys might be sitting around here making decisions. And there might be a lot easier decisions because we've set a pathway, correct pathway. So really, really good, great work. And I do have a chicken story too, because we have chickens in the middle of Gore, and unfortunately 2 decided that the views were better around town than actually in the run we have. So 2 had to go back to holiday out on the farm. So which I threw them in the back of my car and drove them out there. Lou. So, no, it's great to see. So that's well done. On with it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Have a lovely rest of your school term, and I look forward to catching up with the staff and finding out what else is going on. It'd be great. Thanks very much, team.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's great.
Okay, so my apologies, folks. I'm not sure what Lucy explained to you, but I didn't know that the meeting start time had changed. Wondered why Councillor McPhail was ringing you.
If you'd answered, you would have known.
I couldn't at the time.
We
I do
did
need
say we didn't like his lipstick colour this morning.
I do need to check whether we did some apologies.
Yeah, I've done apologies.
Did you have one?
Yeah,
from
we're just
Councillor
going.
McDonald?
No.
Yes. So I was also on a phone call.
Are you still happy to move a second?
Councillor
And
McDonald's
apology for Councillor
had
McDonald.
a family thing, and he's going to be a wee bit. He might be here for the workshop later, but he's an apology for that. And also wanted to check that you'd had a karakia. Did you do it?
No.
Be okay if I do that now? Tū tawa mai I runga, tū tawa mai I raro, tū tawa mai I roto, tū tawa mai I waho. Kia tau ai te Māori tū, te Māori ora ki te katoa. Au mie hui tae ki. Thank you. Come forth from above, below, within and from the environment. Vitality and well-being for all, strengthened in unity. Thank you. And also, a special welcome back to Anne. Nice to have you in the room with us at Strategy and Policy today. Okay. Where did you get to apart from that? Is that it? Right, good. So the confirmation of minutes of the Wednesday, the 29th of November. Any?
Yes, Madam Chair, I do have a question from the minutes. First of all, I have some sympathy for you not arriving at 9 o'clock because my agenda, which I got last week, says that this meeting starts at 10 a.m.
It initially did start at 10, but we've added a workshop, so it's moved.
Well,
I'd already printed the cover, and distributed it, so I can't change it once it's already done.
Not your.
Just make a suggestion that I don't know how people's phones work, but it works really well if it's linked up to your phone and you get all the changes as they come through. So as things shuffle around, you see it straight away.
I'm a little insulted by that, but yes, I do that already.
Right.
But council is not the only thing I do in my life.
Yeah.
So just to slip up there. Councillor Rodway, your comments about the minutes, please.
On in the minutes at item number 8, Chairman and Councillor's report, I reported on the Ecological Restoration Network group meetings, and you asked or advised that you would like to see us making use of the public forum section more widely by inviting these groups along to the council to speak about this work. We've had a good presentation this morning, but I wonder if there's been any other action, or if there's anything formal in the pipeworks to ensure that can happen.
We did have a brief discussion immediately after the meeting actually about that, and realised that there might be some kind of logistical issues around that. But we haven't gone back to that actually. So I'll follow it up again, Councillor. My fault entirely.
Oh well, no, I wouldn't say that, but it's a good suggestion. I'd like to see something.
Well, I think that's we've set a high bar this morning. I guess it's fair to say that there was a little bit of tension between whether we do the inviting or whether we make it more clear that people can offer to come. So we were working through that kind of tension really. So if you've got any suggestions as to how we can advise all the groups that they're more than welcome to do it 10 minutes, open for that, absolutely. Does that answer your question?
I'm happy to move the adoption of those minutes.
Thank you, Councillor. Seconded, please. Councillor McPhail. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Notification of extraordinary or urgent items. I haven't had any. And no formally submitted questions. Chairman and Councillors' reports. Councillor Rodway, you have a report there. Did you want to speak to any of that?
Oh yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Firstly, the World Wetlands Day. I did report on this at an earlier meeting, but it wasn't included in the minutes. So Jan suggested that that could be done. And so the recommendations in that first report about the Wetlands Day film screening was that we have a workshop and that we invite certain people to that workshop so that we can get this wetlands task force underway. Yesterday, Councillor Gibson organised a very good field day, which I didn't attend, and it seems that that was a mistake, so I
And you got
apologise. I apologise. We talked to Councillor Guyton about it and the farmers' work that they've done, and others can report on that, but it sounded very impressive. So I'm not sure how to turn this into a recommendation that results in some action. A bit like the thing we talked about yours recently. I think often councillors' requests and reports seem to fall by the wayside, is my impression. And I would just like a better system, I suppose, to deal with recommendations that councillors have. I know that staff have a very busy workload, but we do represent the community, and I think that some of the things that we sometimes get a bit frustrated about that are not happening, that we feel should be happening, need to be addressed. I don't know how to do that because I know, Lucy, you've already got 110% of your time used up. So, but I think it's an issue that somehow we need to try and address somehow. I don't know how we can do that.
Yes, I agree, Councillor, and I haven't solution yet. Not on my own anyway. I think that's a pipeline that we need to set in some kind of structure, but yeah, I'm open to suggestions. Councillor Morrill.
Oh, just on that topic, maybe we get a report going back. We'd like to use more use of public forum, and if we're actually asking them to come, is that within the gamut of the spirit of public forum? I'm not sure. It may be as much as, often we do say to people, if you'd like to come, and, you're welcome to come. That may be a better approach, but I think Morris makes a good point. We don't have that many people coming into public forum. I'm not sure whether it's kosher for us to almost direct them to come. I think we need to make the opportunity rather than.
Yep. But as far as councillors requesting reports from staff, I'll flick up to Lucy first. Yeah, thanks.
We really need a space where those requests are recorded so we can, because it's the great forgetting that's the problem, and it's so easy to forget because there's so much. We could put a whiteboard up over there and we'll write on what we've asked for and rub it off when it's been. I mean, it's not staff's problem. It's structural problems. We need to do something tangible.
So through you, Chair, and Rachel might want to jump in as well. But one of the ways that we track your requests between meetings is they get recorded. Jan records them in a spreadsheet, and then we look at them every week at exec to make sure that they're progressing. And if people need a response, or if it's something very specific that requires some more work, then we keep track of how those responses are being attended to. But I think what I heard from your question, Councillor Robbo, was more about things that are specifically requested in meetings, like the invitation to the Ariti group that you just mentioned, and how do we pick those up in a similar way and make sure that we're tracking them. So that's definitely something that between Rach and I and Shannon as well, we can take back and talk to Jan about how we just tie all of those things together so that we've got one place where your requests are being caught, and then we can make sure that we are tracking some actions, and where we need to discuss with yourselves more broadly, then we can do that in a variety of ways. So either via your briefings that you get from Wilma, or the meetings that the chair has with Wilma or with staff. So there's multiple ways we can do it. I like your whiteboard idea though too.
There was also what we had started to do at OPEC last term was, in the chairman's report, there would be a kind of a running action list, and so if I picked up anything in the meeting that needed followed up, then it went into a kind of an action list as part of the chairman's report section of the agenda. And so we would go back and visit that, and staff would be able to update on whether that had been completed or checked or whatever it was, and we would tick it off and move it off the action list when it was finished. So there's that opportunity here too, I suppose.
We're just about to receive has a full action tracking system built into it. So everything from each meeting I'll designate out to staff, and they must be signed off by managers, and we can track those.
So that might solve that problem. But thanks for raising it, councillor, because I think it's important we don't lose track of some of those great suggestions, but also mindful that we have to be judicious in what we request of staff.
Thank you. Well, the other part of that report, Madam Chair, relates to Southern Field Days. And some of the things that I've suggested in here are already being done, I know. So it's not a specific request for something here, it's already in the program. It does relate to farm plans and the issue of winter grazing and the problems that it causes. The farm planning part of the field days was good, and I understand other councillors had a look at that and think that was very useful. But I do note that there is an inconsistency between what the ES website says about farm plans and what the Appendix N, the 9th interim decision, says. So hopefully that can be addressed. Overseer is a great tool, but it's expensive and not really necessary, in my view, for people with low intensity operations, and that could apply to most sheep operations. The Appendix N says that you don't need overseer, but you do need a nutrient budget, which leaves the field a bit more open, which is good. So if staff could have a look at the website just to make sure that is consistent with what the latest Environment Court decision says, that would be good. And then my comments on winter grazing, they're pretty self-explanatory. So yeah, I hope that we can ultimately at some stage get rid of the kind of winter grazing that we do and have these systems in place, because then we will be able to achieve high aura in our streams a lot more. It'll be a lot more likely than if we carry on with the kind of winter grazing that occurs at the moment and try to fix it by building wetlands, and we still need to deal with that. But if we had a lot more shelters that animals could be housed in over the winter, we would be a lot better off as far as water quality is concerned. Thank you.
Thanks, councillor. Anybody got questions for Councillor Riley? Councillor McFarlane.
Yeah, I fully support most of what just Morris had said. Winter grazing isn't the only problem in Southland in regards to water quality, but certainly we have discussed some of the use of wood chips and pads and things like that, there's plenty of studies done around the world of how good they are absorbing nitrates and even moisture in those scenarios. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel here. There's plenty of science there saying these are good things to have. We just don't want to bind it all up in a regulatory regime that makes it too hard to actually implement these things too. So there's a good balance. I certainly, again, Morris and I have talked about there are probably a lot of people in the farming, there's quite a large chunk that probably you don't really need to even talk to around nutrient losses and that, and they're doing a lot of stuff anyway. And we don't have the ability to knock on every door, and they're obviously lower risk profile of their farms. So certainly agree, it can be done a lot easier, but again, we're sort of the regulatory, we just don't want to get these rules wrong and bind people up into a scenario where it's pretty hard to work through. But the field days are really good. Great site, great for the staff. Congratulations. It was good to see people coming in. And it was reasonably positive from the point that people were asking questions, not yelling at us, so that was good. And in all this, it's about clarity. It's about, people just want clarity of what they need to do, what's coming. And of course, we're asking the same questions to the government. We need clarity. What are you going to do? If you're going to change things, tell us when we can do it. But, that's probably the word. It's clear indications where the future goes is what the public is wanting. So.
Next, Councillor, Lucy's got a response to.
Thank you, Chair. Just on the questions that you raised, Councillor, about overseer and the Appendix N differential. So one of the things we're working through at the moment, and we'll discuss a little more later, around the nutrient budget approval route. So that's what you outlined in your report about the executive having those powers within Appendix N. Is true, they can approve nutrient budget tools that are different from overseer, and so the process, we've had one request in to do that since the Appendix N decision came through, and we've just been working through the kind of technical information she would need in order to inform that decision. So we'll be able to give you more detail about that when we meet a little later in the workshop. But thank you for flagging the website discrepancy.
Have the website been updated yet?
Yeah. We'll have a look.
Next, Councillor Guyton, sorry.
Yeah, I'm just mindful of discussions that I heard over a decade ago when I first came onto council, and our CEO at the time was Kieran Keogh, and he was very keen on barns as a process for getting animals off the wet Southland soils over winter. And I remember the discussion was around, he was keen to promote this idea, but councillors were holding back, saying, well, we can't tell farmers what to do. We can't advise anyone, because if we do, we'll be held liable if it doesn't work. Have we progressed at all? And now we're still saying we can't regulate to make people do these things. We have to show. Have we gotten anywhere? This is just a thought that occurred to me.
A rhetorical question, we will leave it as a particular point in time. Thank you for that thought-provoking question.
Just a point of clarification. I'm not saying we can't. I'm saying that it's about enabling the people to be able to do these things. And it's not just barns. These are standoff areas. These are not about building sheds. So there is, the people want to do these things.
Thank you. Rightio. Thanks,
We're
Councillor
not look towards your seat.
Oh, sorry.
I'm just going to do a little bit of report, and it's going to come in two parts. One is that we went yesterday to have a look at these wetlands and see, and if Councillor Rodway had to come with us, he would have noticed that we will not need barns and all those sort of things, because your wetlands can take all that up as it goes down. Okay, shake your head, but it's a move in the right direction. It was really well done. The farmer took us around and showed us everything that he was doing and how it was working. He's done it over a 20-year period, probably spent just shy of $1 million on it. But it's really that money he spent has been spent because he enjoyed spending it. But if you really sit on the top of the hill up there in the driving rain, waiting for people that weren't there on time, you could see that it was a public good. It wasn't a personal good. So we've got to look at this in a different way, I think. The second bit of it was later yesterday afternoon, overseen by Arnica and approved by her. Phil, you give us a wee rundown and the timeline of what we're going to do, because this addresses the issue of putting things in a timeline and getting going, which I'm starting to get a kickback for, but it's the only way to do it. Go, Phil.
I just think that might be a more appropriate topic to discuss in detail, perhaps at the next workshop we're doing after this, which is.
We'll just give them a run.
No, just that there's an opportunity to progress the wetland thing. I wouldn't want to deviate too much onto that topic right now, to be honest, because there could be a really detailed discussion around that, which could consume more time than it's allowed.
And this is the part of the agenda where we just get some updates from people who've gone to this.
But certainly flag there's an opportunity to progress the wetlands opportunities in a meaningful manner in the near future.
Great. Thanks for your organising that trip yesterday, councillor. Apologies for not being able to be there yesterday. Councillor Gordon, did you still have something?
Well, just in support of councillor Gibson's comments about the wetlands yesterday. One thing I noticed, and it ties in with what councillor Rodway was saying, I think, is not only has this very talented farmer created this extraordinary network of wetlands, but he also has a different approach to his animal management. And I remember him saying about lower stocking rates and not block feeding or break feeding winter crops. And I thought that was really telling. So not only is it a matter of capturing these outputs through wetlands, but also the management of his farm. It was really, really interesting to hear from.
We will do get a repeat visit and I can come.
And his stock mix, I think, makes that absolutely.
Chairman Horrell.
Yes, Madam Chair. Congratulations on organising the day yesterday, and while I kept you out of the rain because you'd actually given me the wrong record number. That was your fault.
I did.
But it was a good day, a good day out, and it does sort of bring home trying to have a regulation that micromanages all farming doesn't actually work. And I think you have to go back to basics and point out the problems you're trying to fix. And in that case, he had huge buffering for what little winter grazing he did anyway. And I think we have to be flexible there. But the extent of the wetlands from a slow the flow type of concept. Again, it's not just sediment management. On that property, if we had 40 or 50 of those in the catchment, that would help slow the flow in Watawa in a significant event. So it was very interesting day out to have a look, and certainly the expansive hill country where it hasn't a flat paddock on the farm, so the slope problem was quite difficult for him. But he's mitigating what little effect they have. And when we talk about the intensive winter grazing, stock still got to be raised in the winter time. So in some cases it might be in a shed, but if you just put it on crop, we've already seen what people have a whole lot of baleage on grass. I think we're still far better to signal keep your soil and your nutrients on your property, because that applies to all sorts of farm grazing methods over the winter time. Field days, yes, great work by the staff. They put a lot of work into having the tents up and meeting the public. So well done, guys. I spent a bit of time there, but I sort of went round, especially on the wet day, around the bigger building and had some very useful conversations at quite a number of sites. And congratulations to John and the team that had the Lamb Day was very successful, and that seemed to go down very well. A lot of people got to raise their chop, and so it was a very good public publicity, and also for the Armstrong mental health thing. Well done. Had quite a promising conversation, Wilbur and I, with Todd McClay, and he's quite keen for us to go to Wellington sooner rather than later. I said, I think we can help you with, we've seen the highlight, the headline stuff, but there's detail I think that we and probably other regional councils could actually help with. I'm also will suggest that we set up a small group similar to the winter grazing module that included MFA and MPI as observers. So you'd have Fair Farmers, you'd have people from Land, you'd have Dairy NZ in the room, and if they gave a list of things they wanted advice on, I think that could be quite useful, because that was a very successful model on the intensive winter grazing, and we got most of the results we wanted from it. So I'm looking forward to having those conversations. He's very clear that farm plans have got to be simple enough that farmers can, in most cases, do them themselves, which I certainly agree with. It may well mean that we actually have to have a bit of a look at Appendix N, where it's come from, but we actually need a bit more direction as what's going to happen on the national front. The hints are that maybe the whole data locker type national direction may go, but it's not clear at the moment. So we'll follow that with interest.
Thanks, Chairman, you've been busy. Any other reports, councillors? I'm sure Councillor Pemberton will update full council about all his chops. Rightio, moving on. Thank you, everybody. Section 9, we come to our staff reports. So we've got 9.1, which is a retrospective approval for a submission. I have to say, I was, when I read some of your submission points, I was amazed that the originals that you were trying to correct were so off-piste. So I'm glad you've submitted on some of those points because they seem to be common sense to me. But anyway, I'm looking forward to your comments.
Well, thank you, Chair. That's encouraging to hear. So I will quickly share. Okay, so morning everyone. So yeah, we're just here for a retrospective approval, hopefully on, I don't know how that's not come up as full screen. Retrospective approval on the submission we've done on the Brodifficombe. Unfortunately, the submission period was over December and January, so we weren't able to bring this to you for and appreciate that it is a very technical operational submission, and so I do have some little bits of background points for you to help you understand it, and then happy to answer any questions that you may have on it. I don't know if there's a lot open. Sorry about this, guys.
Gerald, did you get the enunciation?
It's one of those days, it appears.
It really is.
It's a new system.
We were used to the old system.
I was going to say something, I really was.
I mean, I can't.
Hatred of plants. It's terrible. Terrible. But I held my tongue. Here we go.
Yes, okay. He's sitting next to you and I know. Sorry about that. And when we move on to the next presentation, it might happen again. So if you can just bear with us this morning. So Brodifficombe, it is a toxin. It is Brodifficombe. You can call it Brody. Everyone else does it. It is.
We're just trying to get the right
lunch. So it is a toxin. It is used for pest control. It is one of the core tools that we use in biosecurity, which is why we are interested in this and why we have done a submission. The review is being done by the ACBM, and it's all around trying to ensure that we don't have vertebrate toxins, animal toxins going into the food chain, which we support 100%. We don't want to see any of this happening in the food chain. But we do want to be able to use these toxins in safe ways as and when it is appropriate to do so. So the biosecurity team, the animal team, spent a lot of time going through this, going through the technicalities of Brodifficombe, how it's being used, what it's being used for, and risk pathways to make sure that when we're looking at the submission, we are really thinking about that key goal of actually we do want to prevent it getting into the food chain as well as doing that animal control. So what is Brodifficombe? It's an anticoagulant toxin. That means it acts very much like warfarin. It gets into the bloodstream, it thins the blood, and then you can't clot. In lethal dose for a human is 5 kilograms of prey. So for a toddler needs to eat quite a lot of this. An adult would need to eat about 50 So in terms of eating it from the shelf, you're pretty safe unless you're eating huge amounts. Still don't recommend eating it, but it does bioaccumulate and it does create secondary poisoning. So that means if a rat eats it, dies from it, or holds it in their liver and something else eats them, then it can kill that secondary thing. Which from a animal pest perspective is great, because it means that if a rat eats it, we can then kill the stoats and the feral cats and the other things that are eating those things. But that does mean it creates that additional risk. If it stays in the environment a little bit longer, it can build up. It can build up in the livers of things like pigs. It can get into deer and it then can enter the food chain if it's used inappropriately. So the key is making sure we're using it as appropriately as possible. It's not soluble in water, which means it doesn't really get into plants. So because it doesn't get into the water, it can't get uptaken into plants, which means it's unlikely to get into the food chain that way. And it does bind strongly in soil. So once it's in the soil, it binds and it doesn't move very far. So the biggest risk is when it's in an animal, in a liver, something like that, and it can accumulate up the food chain. Or if animals are eating it directly. So if bait lies on the ground and a deer comes along and eats it, then you'll get in. But as I said, you need a lot of it as a larger mammal for it to kill you. You can do damage. So what do we use it for? We at Environment Southland use it for possum and rodent control. We only use it in bait station and ground operations, but it is used aerially in other parts of the country and islands for eradication projects. It is not used in the way it's used in the picture. It's spread with 1 or 2 baits over a couple of hectares. But having said that, as an organisation, we are purchasing about 4.5 tonne over the year, and that is then distributed out to farmers within our PCA programme. 4.5 tonne sounds like a lot, but that is the weight of the product. Of that, only 0.02 to 0.05 grams of every kilogram is actually the active ingredient. So most of what we are putting out in the environment is the carrying pellets, which is kind of like a wheat bix type thing with a little bit of green dye in it to keep the birds off it and a little bit of cinnamon. So for every one of those pellets that you see, there's only a tiny little micro bit of that is that active ingredient of the toxin. Those 4.5 tonnes goes out to between 800 and 1,000 landowners, generally for the secondary maintenance of the PCA programme, the Possum Control Area Programme, and it's also used a little bit for the initial control, but we use a lot of cyanide for initial control as well. So we are using it. We're using it predominantly for possums, a little bit of rodent control, and it's all done on the ground here in Environment Southland. There are a lot of current rules in place around its use, and there's a lot of best practice guidance that as a sector we follow. So things like if you're using on the ground, it should be used in a bait station. That bait station should always be placed out of stock, out of rich of stock on wild game, and they should be the right type of bait station. So putting it in an ice cream tub is not a bait station. That is not an appropriate use of toxin. They need to be designed for holding bait and in a way that other things, non-target things, can't get in. There's rules around transporting them. There's a lot of information on the product label about how you can use it, what to do in emergency, what to do, the residual warnings and legal obligations in terms of disposal and stuff like that. And there's rules around signage in terms of making sure that you are best practice on signage and what you can and can't say. So there are things in place, but we do acknowledge that things can be tightened up, and therefore we have really quite key points in this information. So the key changes that were being proposed, one of the things to point out is that from our reading of the proposal, they've only really looked at residential rodent control. It doesn't really deal with possum control and wide-scale landscape rodent control, which is our use for it. They're suggesting a sales limit of only 300 grams. Now that's perfectly reasonable if you are in a urban environment and you're trying to do your rat control at home in your ceiling potentially, but it does not work for possums.
No. Is it active ingredient?
No, that's the full weight of the pack.
Yeah, well, so it's not much.
It's not much. It's not much. So So my possum team tell us that down here in Southland, a possum bait station needs at least 350 in to kill the possums. So we could not, without a license, buy enough for one possum bait station here in Southland under these rules. The proposal is suggesting new licensing requirements, but those requirements are different to our existing licensing requirements for other toxins. It's suggesting operational plan requirements for purchases over 300 grams and increased signage requirements. So our feedback, and apologies about this slide, it's all in your pack as well, but I wanted to make sure we got the right information, is that actually Britificum is used for all sorts of things, not just urban rodent control. So when they are reviewing these toxins for use, they need to be looking at all types of use. And not only that, they need to be ensuring, if we're looking at it just in the food chain, we also need to look at it in terms of the environment and potentially environmental damage of bioaccumulation of our native species and things like raptors. So we should be, if they're doing a review, it should be a comprehensive review that looks at the whole type of use and the whole type of damage. So we're suggesting they go back and actually look at that. And find ways of allowing us to keep the community using it. We're quite worried that some of these recommendations would make it impossible for farmers and community groups to use Britificum. We believe that rather than having a totally separate license just for Britificum, it should be rolled into the existing controlled substance license. So if you are using it for aerial control or you're using it in vast amounts, then yes, it is very appropriate to have a license, but why not tie that into the existing license system that we have for 1080 and other toxins that we use. We are agreeing that 300 grams for a household and environment is absolutely fine. So being able to go down to your rural supplier and buy 300 grams for use at home, great.
I think that's ridiculous because it's dear enough now to buy in half kilo or kilo lots. If you go to 300 grams, your packaging is going to outweigh the product. So I think my suggestion would be to make that 500 or greater, but 2 kilos. 2 kilos. Because we're always, lifestylers or farmers, whatever, we buy it to get rid of rats in the shed or in the road.
Yeah, clarifying it for you. Thanks, Ellie. Carry on.
Okay. We are also recommending that actually they do retain having that license, but it's for people that are working over multiple properties or for aerial operations. So people like our contractors who are going in and working with thousands of landowners, then it is more than appropriate. The amounts they use, having a license, it should be part of their business model. We should be sure that they're using it properly and a license is fully appropriate. We're also supportive that for community groups and people working on land that's got a lot of public access, that actually having one licensed person who's responsible for buying, storing and training others is appropriate. Because actually some of our community groups do buy a lot of it. But the current recommendation is that that person would then have to be on the site with the people that are using it all the time. And we do not believe that that is practical for our community groups or for landowners who, it might be the landowner that's asked their farm workers to go and do pest control. You don't want to have made sure that every one of those people on the farm that could be doing it is licensed. We don't think that's reasonable or would help support what we're actually trying to do. So from that, we are saying that removing that license for anything less than 30 kg for landowners where it's part of a coordinated landscape project by professional organisations such as regional councils. So there might be a role in there for us to say, actually, this is a PCA programme and we will take on the responsibility for all of the landowners in terms of it. And you're part of this and therefore you can go and buy it. And that there's improved operational plans in place and there's no public access. Retaining 300 grams if you don't have that ticket and you're not part of that bigger piece of work, but then increasing the limit to 30 grams if they can provide evidence that they're part of that wider programme and they've got an operational plan and some public access. So I guess what we're essentially saying is some of it's really good, but actually we need to have a little bit more practicality around there in terms of possum control, landscape use, and making sure that it's appropriate for.
Thanks, Ellie. Great explanation. Councillor Roy and then Councillor Guyton.
you've answered one of my questions, which was your support to embed it into the existing toxin syllabus. There are other things that are out there, and I hope there are some new things coming as well, because there's shyness for what has been a non-lethal dose. We need something else as well. So two other questions. One, the qualifications in some circumstances, where's that likely to end up? I actually have a farm in an area that has been under movement control, not in Southland. It's just lifted last year, but possums and mustelids are a key activity that will take place there, and that's why the 300 grams isn't sufficient either. So what's likely to happen around the requirement of some kind of qualification?
So if it goes through as it currently is, yourself as the landowner and any of your employees or your family that go and do that bait would have to have a license.
How do I get a license?
So they haven't fully outlined the process in it, but I think they're saying it would be about $150, I think they've said, and there's probably a test you have to do. So our recommendation is actually might be suitable for one person on that property who's doing, if you're doing the purchasing and you're buying a lot and you're organising it, great, but for everybody, it's over the top for what they're trying to achieve.
Right. My third question is about interaction and getting it into the food chain. I do represent another industry, and it is an issue there where vermin control and a rat that's going to die before it dies, if it urinates on feed that's been consumed by animals or drops a pellet that's consumed, a fecal pellet, that does show up, and that it is being traced, and it has been an issue for human consumption. So even the faintest trace rings alarm bells, and so you're telling me I've got to eat 15 kilos of bait. Sort of, I'm not too sure where that all squares off.
Yeah, so there is a difference between how much you have to eat to kill you and reputational risk and being able to sell our products overseas. We do want to have absolutely zero in terms of getting it into the food chain and being able to sell
It's listed under Codex Alimentarius as a certain levels, but even the faintest bit actually rings alarm bells.
Thank you. Just reminding councillors that this is retrospective, so
yeah, I know. That's right.
I don't want to cut the conversation short, but just bear that in mind. I've got 4 more speakers to go yet. So Councillor Guyton, you're next, and then
Thank you. Just
Jenna
quickly,
Hall.
yeah, there's a difference between lethal dose and sublethal, and what sublethal means. You could get awfully ill, but not be dead. So you have to bear in mind. Now, I remember a discussion again about a decade ago here where there were fish found in the rivers of Southern, and they had in their livers. This was a news report through the Southern Times, and we discussed it here. So it's out there already, and there's been continued use. If we're going to be supportive or using this, have we got a baseline? I mean, because I remember the discussion at the time was, well, we didn't really test for those things. It's too expensive to do it. And yet, if we're using it and promoting it and supporting it, we've got an obligation in terms of toxins in the environment, don't we? Environment Southland does, I would have thought. So the next thing is you mentioned raptors. And of course, there are hawks, harrier hawks, and even falcons who might come and feed on these animals. Do we know? Have we got data on that here? Have we got actual data on the effect on raptors? So that's one thing. And the last one is carnivorous insects, because 1080, isn't it? Was it developed as an insecticide originally, wasn't it? It kills insects. Then it was, and then it was found that it also killed these other creatures, and so that's why we use it. But it's an insecticide. Is this as well? And if it's being broadcast around Southland in what sounds like quite considerable doses, are carnivorous insects which are in the soil, because you mentioned that it's soil stable, so to speak. Is it getting into the carnivorous insect population?
Okay, so
do we know these things?
First part of the question, we are not actively sampling for vertebrate toxins in any of in the environment, as far as I'm aware, as in Roche Island. And we don't have specific raptor. We're not monitoring that either. But there is a lot of national research around you will get knocked down when it's first used, and then the bird populations do normally bounce back. But we are not monitoring that. And the third one, in terms of insects, I'll have to come back to you, but I do know that insects like living in the bait stations quite often, so it's not killing them, but whether it's then, I would have to come back to you on that.
Councillor Darcher,
Okay.
you are?
Yes, no, but yes, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Horrell.
Yes, no, thanks for that report. The conversation did go on still about one or two groups. And the amount that have to be eaten to cause human health issues is huge, but one case where there was one bait station, nobody knew was still there. That hundred of deer had been told they were allowed to sell any of them because of the remote possibility that something, because most of our use is in bait stations, so we're not broadcasting, are we? So I guess it's causing some frustrations. I know we're going back to cyanide in some cases to try and be compatible with the deer numbers down. But right around the countryside, if we haven't got the people tools, a lot of the pests we've got out there are going to get away on this. I was at the Osprey stakeholders meeting the other day, and the TB outbreak in Hawke's Bay last year, and I suspect one of the major reasons was that the PCAs that they actually pioneered had fallen over, so the numbers had come back, and once again you had other issues. So, and Eric asked the question too: I'm wondering, are there other toxins being worked on that might be available in the future? Because we are quite limited. You've got opposition to 1080, so the tools we've got are quite small. But well done picking up on those points. And the fact that we actually bulk buy for the bait stations, we certainly want to be able to continue to do that. Supply at probably a lower cost to PCAs than otherwise. But it's something, ongoing conversation. It may actually, conversation we had the other day about PCAs would have a licensed operator to do it. Some people going their own or not doing it. That may actually play into that becoming a way of doing these things in the future. No, but thanks for the report. You picked up on a few issues. It does seem to be overly good. And science and even taking out everything there a practical option in some of those remote areas. My fear is going to stop people doing a really good job in keeping possums and mustelids down.
Councillor, I've got Councillor Pemberton and then Councillor Cook.
Yeah, probably
and
just
an online question from Councillor Evans.
thank you, Nancy. Just probably just supporting the Chair Horrell. What we're seeing, we've got to make sure we find ways of supporting what's happening, because what we're supporting at the moment isn't enough. Where possum numbers are about to explode, and areas already have, and it just feels like we're wanting to clock back on our own biosecurity, and it is a real concern, especially the numbers that are getting quoted from the Southern Pest Board meeting the other night, AGM, and the numbers they were talking in that the shooters are seeing is phenomenal, and they are in an area where farmers are working very hard with their own poisoning regime and with contractors involved as well. So it is quite a concern, and we're putting a lot of things at risk. So hopefully we can keep supporting people and trying to streamline things a wee bit where we can.
Thanks, Councillor Pemberton. And that also partly covers off perhaps Councillor Evans' question online, but we'll come to you in a minute, Paul. Councillor Cook.
My comments have already been covered by, particularly by Councillor Roy. The concern is about overseas trade. Contamination of air goods going overseas is probably what's backed this review, but we're being asked, the topic is we're being asked whether we will approve or not the recommendations which staff have already submitted on our behalf.
Great.
So I support those submissions. I think they're very practical and to the point.
Thank you. Councillor Evans, did you want to say anything, or can we move on with the recommendation?
Yes, it has become an issue that the possum population is increasing massively. And is this a tool we're going to go down that road because we're losing the battle with possums?
This is the best tool we currently have for the way we're currently operating. And if we lose the ability to use this tool beyond 300 grams at a time, we would be really struggling. There is the work going on, as some of the councillors have alluded to, in terms of research into other toxins, but I don't know how long that's going to take or how this is the best we've currently got. We do try and use cyanide. There are other options, but.
Thanks. I think we might move on.
Happy to move the recommendation, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Chairman Morrell. Seconded, Councillor Roy. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Yes, very fulsome discussion. When are you likely to hear back from progress on those submissions? Do you know? Not sure. So, thanks. Right, 9.2. Rapid progress. After such an auspicious start. The Field and Marine Regional Pathways Management Plan. Just councillors, please be aware that there are a lot of recommendations there. Refresh your memory while we hear from the staff, please. Thank you. Anything to say, staff? Staff business?
Okay, thank you. So, Fiordland Marine Regional Pathways Plan. I'd like to introduce Catherine. I think she's the team leader for marine biosecurity and is involved in the day-to-day management of the Pathways Plan. So you guys have all seen this slide a few times before. It's just a reminder that the Pathways Plan sits in the Biosecurity Act. It's one of our 3 key documents that drives our biosecurity with the intent to reduce and avoid impacts on the economy as well as the environment and biodiversity. So the Fiordland Marine Pathways Plan itself, it was the very first of its kind in the country. It's the first time the Biosecurity Act pathways legislation had ever been used. It became operative in 2017. It aims to prevent marine pests from being transported into the marine area. So it's very much around the transport of all things that could cause a problem rather than targeting individual species. We did receive a biosecurity award in 2018, which is always nice to remember and celebrate. It's a really, really simple plan. It's essentially only 3 rules. You've got to have a clean vessel pass, you've got to be clean, and you've got to keep records. Part of the plan, because it was the first in the country, there was a requirement to do a 5-year, or we included a requirement to do a 5-year review. We're a year late because of COVID and staff changes and things, but essentially what we have now done is that 5-year review, and it is very much an operational review at this point, with a staff level of really going into the plan and looking at it and how it's working and what we think is going well and what we think could be improved. And there are a few areas of improvement which we've outlined to you, and we're recommending that a full, more comprehensive review is completed that includes a lot more consultation, working with iwi, and aligning it with the coastal plan review, so that we're doing one set of consultation with everybody and tying it all into a big piece of work rather than us doing this separately. So what have we found during the review? So it was the first in the country, but now there's quite a few other regions that are doing similar things or have built similar things into their pathways plan. We've got a really strong partnership in the south with the top of the South councils working on marine biosecurity. The Chatham Islands have got border control in place. Northland have got comprehensive rules within, they've got a pathway plan embedded into their path plan. And the top of the north is from Northland all the way down to Hawke's Bay. The council's working together on a Clean Flow Good to Go program with national government. So ours was the first, but it's definitely helped spark off improved marine biosecurity throughout the rest of the country. And that's been really good because we've been able to go and look at what they're doing and what they've learned from us and now learn from them as they improve on things going through. So one of the rules is you've got to have a clean vessel pass. We have issued over 2,000 clean vessel passes since 2017. Of those, we think there's 1,100 individual vessels. One of the interesting things we're finding is that it's actually really hard to know if the vessel is the same vessel that you saw last time because there's no registration, there's no legal registration of vessels, and people use multiple names. So you're not always sure whether the vessel that's got a clean vessel pass is the same vessel with that name last time and things like that. And ownership moves around a lot, and we've got absolutely no way of checking that. But we think there's about 1,196 vessels. 35% of them have come from Southland. So there is a lot of local use of the Fiordland Marine area. 12% from North Island and 3% from overseas. Everything else is Fiordland based, essentially Fiordland. In Milford, in Doubtful, and they're saying that their home port is Fiordland. The process seems to run reasonably well. We've got the admin support team and reception help us with all of the paperwork, and it seems to go through reasonably quickly. And so all the process is working in terms of getting clean passes, and we now have reminders going out when your passes expire. One of the other things we looked at is we always ask when you get clean vessel passes, well, how often are you anti-fouling? So anti-fouling is when you put paint on the bottom of the boat to stop things growing on it. It's one of the key things boat owners can do to stop the spread of pests attaching. They don't touch the boat and then they don't spread. And really great to see that a lot of people do annual anti-fouling. There's also a really high number that don't anti-foul at all. Whether that we don't necessarily ask the right questions in the CVP, we don't know whether that's because they are a boat that doesn't need anti-fouling because they're pulled out all the time and sitting in somebody's driveway, or whether they're just not anti-fouling. So that's probably something we need to be looking at in terms of our comms engagement as well, in terms of the benefits of anti-fouling and when you should anti-foul and maybe change some of the questions. But good to see that most of the operators, the big operators anyway, do anti-foul.
Would there be some anti-foul? Some people who don't anti-foul because they object to anti-foul going into the environment because it's toxic.
Madam, are you happy for me to answer that? Or?
Yes, seeing as it's been asked, but I have got another couple of people as well. So.
Oh, sorry about
that. Modern anti-fouling? Do you know much about modern anti-fouling?
No, if you're cleaning, you can tip it off so it can get in and flakes. I wouldn't think so because there's a lot of other economic advantages of anti-fouling. You're not carrying marine species on your hull as well in terms of how quickly they can go and move through the water and things like that. So I wouldn't expect so, but
we haven't investigated. The plan has been really successful in some areas, so there's definitely an increased awareness, particularly from skippers around the importance of marine biosecurity. Really good compliance rate from all the commercial operators, particularly those in Doubtful Sound. And we have used the plan formally for biosecurity compliance actions, which actually shows that the plan can work when needed to. We had one vessel where we gave them notice and they followed all the rules, and they left and they sorted themselves out, so it was really effective in that circumstance. And another where they didn't, and the plan was robust enough that we were able to prosecute them for not following the plan and not following the rules. So we don't like having to go down that process, but it does show that when we need to, the plan is effective and we can do so. We do have some challenges. So the plan is very restricted around the Fiordland Marine area, which does leave the rest of Southland unprotected from pathways. One of the issues we've been having is that the rules are that you have to be clean on time of entry. So if we find somebody in Fiordland and they're dirty, we have to be able to prove that they were dirty at the time of entry. So we have to know how quickly that organism would grow, and therefore that it would dirty on entry. So that's something we potentially could change. And because of that, the pathways plan doesn't actually prevent the spread of species once they're in Fiordland. So something like Andarea that's already established in Fiordland, the pathways plan can't help it spreading around Fiordland. It can prevent new sites coming in from elsewhere, but not within Fiordland. The low awareness tends to be the recreational users and people from out of region. In some respects, the recreational users are really low risk because they generally have the trailer boats and they're generally out of the water a lot and they dry off. So therefore, pests are less likely to be on them. Out of region users is probably a higher risk. The ports to the north of us have a lot more pests than us. They are our prime risk pathway. So increasing compliance by out of region users is really important to us. Compliance patrols are hard and expensive. And I'm sorry that you can't see the figures on that map, but essentially we've tried to explain how long it takes to get anywhere. So that top yellow line, the very top boat, which shows if we get on a patrol in Doubtful and we have to go all the way up to the Northern Fjords, that's 6 hours of time before you've even stopped a boat or you've even moved into the fjords. If we're taking a boat from Bluff down to Dusky, it can take 12 to 14 hours. So the patrols are great when we're going in there, but they do take a lot of time and they are hard and they're expensive. So it would be great to do more, but it's just the reality of the environment we work in is quite tricky. And there's a lot of health and safety challenges associated with being out there in the marine environment, which we manage, and we've got very comprehensive health and safety plans around snorkeling and diving and getting on and off boats. But it is a challenge and it's something the rest of the organisation have to deal with in the same way. And unfortunately, most of our boats come from Bluff, and Bluff has got Andarea and a few other non-native things that aren't pests, but we don't really want them spread. So it is a high risk port, and we need to make sure that we've got really good comprehensive cleaning going on there to keep protecting us. So again, this is all in your paperwork, so I'm expecting you to read it from the slide, but we are recommending that a more comprehensive review that includes working Mana Whenua and a lot more public consultation happens. We have suggested areas to work on. We're not necessarily suggesting we have to do those things, but we're thinking that they would be good areas to start investigating. But we do think that from an operational perspective, over the next 12 months, we would like to work on the 6 points at the bottom, which is being, at the moment, we've got really good at checking hulls, but we don't always look at the gear on boats. So start doing that. Increasing surveillance and monitoring as we're able to, including probably some patrols into Milford where we don't need to do the big steaming, we can drive in. We'd like to adopt the Marine Vessel Portal, which our colleagues up in the North Island have developed, which is a way of, currently all of our systems are on paper. The Marine Vessel Portal will be on the phone, we'll be able to track all boats, we'll be able to have a link of which boats we've checked, and it's a very exciting modern system which we'd like to adopt.
Take us into the right century, that'd be great.
And waterproof, we're going to have waterproof technology. We'd like to look at adopting the national branding for the Clean, Black, Good to Go, and that's part of trying to make sure we're getting those out of region users and making sure everyone's super clear what the rules are for Fiordland. We're currently leaving paper notices of inspection on every boat that we inspect. We are going to move to an email form of notice for any boat owner where we do actually have a notice for, so that will actually make life a lot easier for people like Catherine who have to carry lots of paper around. And we would like to start looking at those questions we're asking when we're looking at a clean vessel pass, things like the anti-foul, and make sure the questions are actually useful. We're asking that question and covering that data.
Great. Thank you. I have Anne first, and then Councillor Pemberton and Councillor Rodway. Thanks, Anne.
Oh, kia ora, and great report, and also great to hear that you're going to come and have a chat with us. We'd love to be deeply involved in that review. And I'm very sad too that Stuart Bull is not here today. As you know, he would be going on about Fiordland and Marine Guardians and all sorts of exciting things. However, I won't get sidetracked with that. From a mana whenua perspective, we are grappling also with the new government, as you are, and their bid about tourism and boats and things coming into the country. It is a great revenue, you know, for everybody. However, we are very concerned with the things that are coming in on some of those boats, as you said, about anti-fouling. At the same time, you'll be aware, we have a customary permit system for taking kaimoana. And that actually is often done now as an electronic system. And we send it to someone on this silly thing on a boat. And so we've got recreational and commercial guys who are going out and gathering kaimoana in that, like Fiordland area. And sometimes it's been issued from Bluff, sometimes it's been issued from Urapaparima, you know, on behalf of others, etc. And so, yeah, we really, really want to be involved in the review, and we can appreciate all the COVID and the ongoing stuff. My last wee point, and he'll hate me mentioning his name, my husband in a former life had a role where he worked with Ministry of Fisheries, which of course now is called whatever they call it. Anyway, so some of his work would be over summertime to go to boat ramps throughout Fiordland and through, you know, actually the whole of Southland. It's a very small team here in Invercargill who do that mahi, as you know. Anyway, part of their role would often be to pick up the harbour master, get in there, go and do an inspection. However, whilst they're in doing that mahi, they then get calls again or on the radio to say, oh, by the way, down at Ocean Beach, we've just observed somebody, you know, going in there and ripping all the stuff off rocks and, you know, off the beach. So it's a very, very tight, you know, that we're working in here. And yeah, so he's got great knowledge of all those things. But as you may not know too, now in his present life, he's actually working as the deputy chair up at Mirapi Marae. So yeah, he'll have his say too, no doubt, yeah. And he had been a bit involved with Te Ao Marama in the too, so yeah. Anyway, yeah, so good work, and we look forward to engaging with you. Kia ora.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Councillor Finchon?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Looking forward to the review. Quite enjoy the recreational fishing myself, but I do see some gaps. Certainly, I think the recreational stuff, we don't need to be out there burning fuel, we just need to be at the ramps, especially fuel, and I think presence there. Now, we've seen how the quotas change and how we can process fish down at Bluff, and that's been an educational process, and the last few years been a real effort from the team, and I've been on the receiving end of that as far as people coming on board your boat, and they've been really, it's been a really helpful experience for most who are doing the right thing. So yeah, I think just more presence at ramps is really key, and it's a real opportunity to engage with people around, because I just sort of feel Fiordlands. I've only heard of one case of the team being in there when fishing's been happening, and we all know it's all go, and it's not in there. Like it's when the weather's right, people are in there, but it does feel like we're reasonably exposed to people being honest when they're out there. That is a worry.
Yes, Councillor. Councillor Rodway, and then a couple of online questions from Councillor Evans. Thanks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I do have to declare an interest, potential interest here, because I was the commissioner that heard this application and made the recommendation back to the council. So I welcome the review. Obviously, it's slightly overdue, but it's good. I think that the problem about monitoring vessels, as Anne and John have mentioned, is a big issue and probably the most difficult thing. I think the recommendations here are good. I just wonder whether or not more thought could perhaps be given to utilising the skills and the knowledge of people that can be trusted who are in there to act as a kind of a honorary ranger system, I don't know, or some kind of relationship with those people that go there and that know the area and that are trusted. That might increase the presence of the law enforcement in that area. So I support the recommendation, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Evans, do you want to ask your questions out loud?
Yes, if I can everyone hear me?
Yep, thank you.
It's large numbers we're talking about here. And I've got a couple of questions there in chat with regards to limiting access to some of the areas to protect the fueling area, but also with regards to the clean vessel pass, there's quite a number that, as Robert and others have mentioned, that haven't reported anti-fouling. Is this because those vessels are trailered and they don't really require to have any anti-fouling because they're not moored for long periods of time? And there was one other question I had, which was around the unknown vessels. There's a percentage of unknown vessels there, and the three things you said was that they have to have a CVP, that they've got to be clean and got to keep good records. Well, if they're unknown vessels, then they're not keeping good records. So, just concern there.
So the first question around anti-foul, my assumption would be that you're correct and they are trailer boats and they don't need anti-foul, but because of the way we asked the question, we can't know that for sure. So it could be that there's that happening, but there's other things such as Councillor Guyton's comment that there might be other things as to why they're not anti-fouling, but they do need to investigate further, or by changing the way we're asking CVPs. And the same with the unknowns. I think that is because somebody hasn't filled in the bit of the CVP form properly, so they haven't said where they're from. Now, whether we could probably look at the system and say, no, you have to fill in these sections and they're mandatory, that might be a way.
That's online, you'll be able to do that.
Dealing with that, yeah.
Thanks. Chairman Horrell, and then we'll move on to moving the recommendation, please.
I think one of the successes of this program has been the vigilance of operators that are in there all the time, and they value the sounds, and I think they're pretty good at actually keeping an eye on people who may not be obeying the rules. I think there is probably reasonable interaction because we can't be there all the time, but when you've got people there that are doing the right thing, they want everybody else not to let them down. So,
thank you. Would somebody like to move the recommendations?
I'll do that, Madam.
Thank you, Councillor Rodway. Seconded, please. Councillor Morrison. I'm expressing my particular enthusiasm for number 3. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you very much. Thanks, Ellie and team. Great information for us as always. 9.3, the Climate Change and Community Resilience Update. Thanks, Ankar.
Okay. Happy New Year. I think this is the first time I've been in front of council, so hopefully I still can say that for February. It's going quite quickly. This is a very brief update. Obviously, there was quite a significant milestone at the council meeting held earlier this month. Pretty much I can take the briefing as read, just keen to point out a couple of things in terms of phase 1, following the milestone of all councils endorsing the proposed regional climate change strategy. There was a meeting of the regional climate change working group to just work through the recommendations that came through from each of those council meetings and any other feedback And so that's resulted in a few minor changes to the proposed regional climate change strategy, like an addition of phase 1 to the title to make sure that that's clear. There was a typo that was picked up, and a couple other things as well. I think
They were minor
minor
tweaks, just to make sure that there was increased clarity around certain phrases or expressions in there.
Yeah.
The intent won't have changed.
No, so the document remains largely intact. Those changes are now being made, and so the proposed regional climate change strategy is on track to be released via the Environment Southland website at the end of this month, to coincide with the beginning of the Invercargill City Council LTP consultation process. So that's the first LTP process that's kicking off in this region. And the idea is that the strategy will be on the website along with the engagement portal, so that people can provide feedback all the way through to the time where the Gore District Council LTP process closes, which is in early May. So there's a really long feedback period on this, so hopefully we'll get a good response via that. So that's all on track. And in the meantime, there's an interagency report attached to today's briefing, and that largely focuses on the fact that at a recent, the first Regional Climate Change Working Group workshop for this year, the focus has been kick-starting stage 2 of this work, or phase 2 as it's going to be known now. And really that was starting with a high-level look at across all of the aspirations and thinking about what action pathways could be kick-started as part of, where are we going to from here in terms of action, so kick-starting that framework for action process. So Councillor Morrison might like to talk a little bit more about that process. But in the meantime, the rest of the briefing, I think I can take as read.
Certainly, thanks. Councillor, did you want to?
I just emphasise that there's an enthusiasm to progress the phase 2 work, and that we'll be stepping through in sequence the aspirations that have been identified in the phase 1 work. We will, work through those in chunks or blocks. So public engagement, mitigation, adaptation, the overarching aspirations, and a big part of it. So later in the year, we'll be looking at how we manage or seek to manage things like data sharing across the agencies, because we see that bringing data together to get a more complete picture will be a big part of understanding the challenges and opportunities to act moving forward. But priority 1, I think, is the public engagement piece, outreach, public engagement, to start building greater degrees of shared understanding around the climate change, changing climate challenges in the region.
Thanks, Councillor. I have Councillor Guyton and then Anne.
Thank you. My question is around public engagement and your expectations from this, your group, as opposed to expectations from the various councils who are going to be putting this out to the public. What would happen if there was a negative response from the community? Because this could happen in the present political environment, because a number of issues are being progressed in a way that are quite threatening to their continuation. What if that happens in this instance? How much notice will you be required to take of public feedback?
So perhaps 2 parts to that question. One is around the phase 1 work and the proposed regional strategy as it's currently drafted, going out for public consultation. We've identified that we need to facilitate an opportunity for public feedback hearing at the end of the LTP process that allows all of the councils who have contributed to hear and consider that feedback on the phase 1 piece of work.
Right.
So that's the mechanism that we've identified as the appropriate and most efficient way to manage the various forms of feedback, positive, negative, neutral, that may be returned on that LTP during the LTP consultation period. Of course, that doesn't respond to the challenges of how do we make sure that there is transparency around the work that's occurring in phase 2 around developing the subsequent or supporting complementary framework for action. And that's one thing that we'll be considering and taking some thoughts to the mayoral forum on the 1st of March for some guidance or to test their appetite for how of the ways of doing that. One proposal has been to move the existing regional climate change working group to a joint committee status, which would trigger a set of obligations around ensuring that the work that follows is undertaken in a manner that's more transparent to the public than is currently provided for by the working group process. For example, early days on that journey, we need to perhaps an initial test of the appetite of the mayoral forum for that approach. And if there is an appetite to explore that, developing a better understanding what are the pros, cons, and arrangements that we have in place to support that joint committee way of working moving forward. But certainly it's been something that was expressed in one public representation to one of the councils was, how do you provide for public transparency of this work and how do you provide for public input? Would note that there has been an initiative identified in the Beyond 2025 strategy developed by Great South around establishing a form of a public forum for climate change strategy in the region, and we will be looking at whether that's appropriate or how to support Great South in progressing that Beyond 2025 recommendation. That's it.
I've got Anne and then Councillor Rodway. Thanks, Anne.
Oh, well, Happy New Year to you too. I know that there's already been some preliminary discussions with the Dean at Te Ao Marama regarding things like the slow the flow, pilot. However, I'm quite interested in what the framework for action will be or will involve beyond the individual council actions already set under the proposed LTPs. Because as you said, I think it was, is it next week? We go to 1st of March, next Friday. Wow. And we've got, obviously, a board meeting from Environment Southland coming up as well. Yeah. And I'm aware that we've got similar things. You may not be aware that this weekend on Saturday, Bluff will be hosting our, what we call a combined Runanga meeting. We will have Te Runanga, they'll be teamsing in or flying down for it, because this Friday, Te Runanga have their first board meeting for the year, at which point they will elect the deputy Kai Whakahaere. However, if they have a stalemate, I'll put it back out to the public. And then next on Monday, Te Ao Marama have also got their board meeting followed by strategy review. So I'm just mindful where do we fit, because I'll have to report probably on Saturday and Monday about, what the next action is, and committee, obviously.
So the Te Ao Marama is one of our really key partner agencies of the Regional Climate Change Working Group, has been really involved through the process, very much in the early stages in terms of the principles and aspirations. And then the strategy itself has kind of started to become more of a local government document. Though going forward in terms of the framework for action, I know that Te Ao Marama, in my conversations with them, have been very much focused on, okay, we really want to see this action. And I think there's an enthusiasm for action from the group as a whole as well. So I'm really hoping that those conversations continue. In terms of the framework for action and where that sits in relation to slow the flow and current existing projects, I really think there's scope of this group to start looking beyond the immediate things. So there could be some quick wins and things like that, but also to be looking longer term and looking to the next LTP process and the next LTP process beyond. And that this is not going to be a quick fix thing. This is a long-term journey. And so while a framework for action, you could, put some quick actions down on a page and try and tick those off, there's also the need to make sure that we're looking longer term. Hopefully, Te Ao Marama will be a key part of those discussions as well.
Councillor Morrison just wanted.
I was just going to add to that, as we step through the framework for action discussion, a big part of that will be understanding or establishing an inventory of different projects that are already on the books and understanding who's leading those. Part of that will be identifying actually there are projects that remain the responsibility of individual councils and or other agencies that they can happily progress by themselves. There may be opportunities to say, well, actually there's opportunities to work in a joint fashion between one or two or more. And there's probably going to be things where we said actually collectively all of us, it would make sense to work together on. And that could be whether it is public engagement or data sharing as two examples that spring to mind for me, is it would make a lot of sense to try and do those with all of the agencies that are currently involved, plus potentially others coming on board for that. So we will probably surface and get a better understanding of that in the next few months as we step through the next set of workshops.
Thanks, Councillor. We've got Councillor Rodway and then Councillor Guyton to finish us off.
Yes, well, Anne and Robert do raise issues which are potential headwinds that Robert's question about the public getting behind us and thinking that, we don't really have to worry about climate change, and that could be a view of quite a large sector of the community. And if that is the case, then that just means we have to work harder, in my view, to get this over the line and get people thinking about it. And the other bit that Anne mentions about not only the Runanga but the other councils, all getting in alignment is a challenge in my view. Being on the committee, there are differences of opinion of how we should go about achieving what we need to achieve for this. One of the biggest challenges in my view is the resistance, and this is mainly the Southern District Council, but also in the rural community generally, to this solution of planting trees, particularly exotic trees, to get us to a carbon neutral situation. And there is a problem that will be difficult to overcome because there's quite a lot of resistance to that in the community. So Phil has his work cut out, and thank you as well, to get get everybody together and to achieve what we really desperately need to achieve in this.
Thank you. Councillor Guyton, a final question?
Yes, just a clarification regarding mana whenua and our relationship through this particular issue. Are we regarding mana whenua as key stakeholders or a key stakeholder, or are we regarding them as a treaty partner? Because it is different.
I would argue that we throw the net wide. We people working this probably consider them in both of those camps. So there's going to be issues where we need to consider them, engage with mana whenua as a treaty partner, which is entirely appropriate. But then there's going to be perhaps more localised adaptation issues where there may be, for instance, a local Maori agribusiness venture which could be engaged with it on a stakeholder basis. So I think it's appropriate for us to remain very broad thinking and consider both of those opportunities to engage with them as we continue this work, and it may become apparent in particular instances that one is more appropriate than the other.
I should have been more clear with regard to Te Ao Marama.
Yeah, well, we work as co-chair along with Dean of this working group. We consider Te Ao Marama as our key partner with ES as we engage with the other councils.
Lucy might have a thought on that too.
Yeah, just to jump in, thank you, Chair. I would strongly say they're partners in this work stream, and that, as Councillor Morrison has alluded to, there might be specific circumstances where they might choose to have more of a stakeholder role in specific topics, but from a governance perspective and the way that the programme and the strategy and the framework for action will be rolled out, as with our other programmes, strong partners is the intention.
Thank you. Would somebody like to move that we receive them?
Happy to move, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Chairman Laurel, seconded Councillor Rodway. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. We still have 2 items to go, so let's crack on, please. 9.4 is the Water and Land Portfolio Update. Thank you, Liz. Welcome.
So first paper is just giving an update on what's happening in water and land. It is largely policy focused report. However, there is one of the recommendations is to approve the guiding principles, and that's guiding all of the water and land portfolio work that we're doing. So that includes science, the action work. So we had a workshop end of January where we discussed the principles. And that's on page 62. And at that workshop, there were some recommendations to change the principles and just add some dirty words and sentiments. So the recommendation is that we approve those changes and continue with our work in the water and land portfolio with that in mind. The other topics covered in this paper are the work that's happening with the implementation of the proposed plan. So currently working through the plan to make provisions operative, hopefully in the first quarter of this year. Working towards that. However, part of that implementation work is obviously the farm plan rollout, in which we'll have a workshop coming up after this. But it's really, we're just trying to work how national regulations, and what's in the regional plan and MSN can work together, and how we can roll it out across the community. The bigger piece of work is plan change tuatahi, and looking at how we can manipulate the work that we're doing in light of what has come out of the central government in terms of announcements and changes to the RMA. At the workshop, a number of options were put. One was to carry on with the work that we're doing under the NPCVN. It's a piece of legislation that's there and that we're working towards. The other option was to stop, take a pause, and we've got till 2027 to get this work done under the current NPCVN, and that would give us time to see what was going to come out of government over the next 18 months. Third option that came out as the third option at the workshop was that we reframe and focus the work that we're doing in PCT and make sure that the work that has been done up till now is reflected in a Southland approach to the objectives in the plan that we've already got, that we are addressing our obligations under the RMA, and we are making progress towards improving the waterways and the land management in the region. So one of the recommendations is just to approve that approach in general. We will obviously have to come back and work out what that actually is, what the scope, how that scope changes and how approach changes. So that will be part of a further piece of work over the next couple of weeks. In terms of the update on the appeals, nothing much has happened since we last reported, so watch the space. We've still got a couple of matters that are either to get a decision from the High Court or to be heard in the High Court, and some matters that are still with the Environment Court. So those provisions won't obviously be decided in April or early this year, but they'll be ongoing. So that's pretty much that report. Happy to take questions and obviously the recommendations required.
Yep, just quickly to add to this report, Chair, next week we've got scheduled a workshop on the 28th, which is at the moment booked for the whole day to discuss the plan change to Tuatahi scope questions. So staff are working in the background around the detail of what
it's the Southland solution approach, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Gibson?
There is some discussion amongst people who are in the know that Appendix N is not represented by the local people, it's represented by the experts that put it in place during the court case. And some are saying we need to go back to the public.
I think
that gives you a comment.
Yeah, my understanding, and we can discuss that further in the workshop following. However, my understanding is that the content of Appendix N didn't necessarily change dramatically through from council's decisions and what came out of court. It was really just around the process and how it's dealt with. So
just be aware it's out there.
Yes, yeah, and that we would have to reflect that in how we message and how we roll out the Appendix N provisions.
Any other questions for the team?
Move the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Roy. Someone like to second? Do you have a question?
A quick question statement. Obviously, when we're, and we are obviously going to be discussing about the reframing of plan change to Tuatahi, and I was just reflecting back on when Ellie was doing the retrospective submission for us with the Brody. And yes, it was over Christmas, it was over December and January, and we're looking maybe the end of the year, plan change to a day. We've got to get these dates right. It's the worst time to be doing it. And that's what I know I'll put forward. It's about the consultation on this. It's going to be hugely important, the timing and allowing the community to understand things. So, but we'll discuss that in the future. But I just reflected on that last one. You go, nobody wants to work up. I said December, January. It's usually got the government and the wisdom seem to throw it out there and then go on holiday. So we just need to reflect on that.
Thank you. I just have one more question from Anne.
My apologies and thank you.
No problem.
I'm very aware that we need to make, as they say, hay while the sun shines and not wait for something from government. We discussed this recently, with the federal group dial meeting, and it's quite clear we're better to make progress whilst we can, because you don't know if something's going to be urgent at midnight in Parliament, by the next morning it's gone. And I think Councillor Gibson talked really well about your Wetlands Day yesterday, and the fact that 20 years ago that farmer just decided, let's do it, make the change now and advance things. And as you said, it looks fantastic, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah.
And I wanted my friend to advance that, but he didn't want to.
So, yeah, my apologies to waffle on, and welcome, Stuart. Great to have you here for our workshop.
Kia ora, Stuart. Thanks, and we've got a recommendation on the table, moved by Councillor Roy and seconded by Councillor Pemberton, I think. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried, thank you. And moving to the final item, 9.5 is the group program update. Also,
right, so this paper just is an update of what's happening in the group, obviously. So there's been some national changes in terms of legislation and government announcements. First, regarding fast track consenting, which is coming at us relatively quickly with some speed. So we watch that space. And also the government announcements around the hierarchy of Te Mano Te Wai and how it may be implemented in the consenting process. So there's likely to be a change to the RMA so that big consents do not need to refer to their hierarchy in the consent process. It may not necessarily affect us greatly, given that we've got Te Mano Te Wai already in our plan, but we wait and see what that change is going to come up with later this year. At a regional perspective, the proposed core district plan is still in the process of being developed. But they've now got the call out for further submissions. So we are, Remote South made a submission on that. We have the ability to make further submissions. So we're working through the wealth of submissions that were received by Gore District Council to see whether we need to further comment on them. We will, I think we've got till the end of the month to do that. The Otago Land and Water Plan, regional plan, is at a stage where they are consulting with specific stakeholders. We're included in that group. So it's a formal process, but it's not necessarily a submission that we are providing. So we're just giving them feedback. With staff, we're going to meet with the staff in person tomorrow to discuss that, and we'll look to see whether there's a need to make any major changes or recommendations or suggestions on that. We've got the Regional Land Transport Plan. It's out for submissions at the moment. It's a mid-term review. There's some minor changes in it, nothing significant, but we wait to see what comes out of that process. As the report notes, the government policy statement has not yet been put down, so the land transport plan is meant to consider that. So we are anticipating that the way that the RLTP is being drafted there will not need to be a change once the government does give us their GPS, but it's also watch and space. But during that, maybe Councillor McFarlane mentioned that. What else is going on? Lots more going on in terms of submissions than there was at the last report, mainly at the regional level. There's also the dam safety regulations, which are we're out for comment. So as a council, we obviously have a dam, so our operational team were involved in giving some feedback on those regulations. From an organisation, we've given that. I'm not sure what your awareness is around those dam safety regulations, but from May this year, people who have dams have 2 years to come up with an operational plan just to show us how the dams are going to be operated, maintained, and monitored in the future. So that will affect a number of our landowners across the region.
We might have significant discussion on that. Yes.
If we need to, we could bring something back to the committee to outline what those mean and what the implications are on the organisation. I just note on the page 72, there was a bit of a typo. The sentence on the last column under the Otago Regional and Water Plan, the sentence finishes mid-sentence. It says feedback will be collated and that should be shared with the Otago region.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Guyton, Councillor McFarlane, and Chairman Horrell, I think. Yes. And Mindy.
Thank you. Yeah, my question's around Te Manawa, and you mentioned that we have it embedded in our plan. The government is jiggery-pokering it to change its status in the hierarchy as a workaround, I would say. Are we the only council who will have that hierarchy with Te Manawa embedded, or are there others already?
I'm unsure of that. I guess our plan doesn't necessarily have the exact wording that was in the NTCF in terms of the hierarchy, but as a region we're allowed to interpret it as we see fit.
Yeah, so through you, Chair, our plan has currently got Te Manawa as a concept within it at that high level of non-objectives that are already operative, but what it doesn't have is the hierarchy that came through as that latest version. And so the changes that the government are currently discussing and thinking about is a change to the RMA, which is specific around how the hierarchy of obligations within the NPSFM are applied specifically to consent decisions. So it's a narrow change to the RMA as opposed to, and other regions do have Te Manawa in their plans, but for us, ours is obviously in our objectives, like Korowai objective in terms of it has to be pulled all the way through the rest of the policies and rules. So we're further advanced than others, and obviously the way we have articulated it, I mean, for us as a region, we did in partnership, so it's that's not going anywhere anytime soon. It depends everything else.
Through the chair, in the appeal court paper ruling on the use of Te Manawa, clear direction that would be a clear consideration.
Absolutely, Chair. That's correct. Yeah, and one of the earlier decisions, I can't remember if it was third or fourth or fifth. One of the 9 decisions we've had from the court was relating to the objectives and what Te Manawa meant and how it had to be seen through the rest of the plan.
Councillor McFarlane, then Chairman Horrell.
Just in regards to the Otago Land Water Regional Plan, the privilege of living on the border, looking at my fellow farmers over the road and having completely different set of rules. One place with a another place. Is there going to be, can you see that it's going to be synergy between our 2 plans? Because they still have the same water issues, same land, same everything, climate. For the last 20 years, they've had no consents. We've had consents for farming, Are we going to get and 2 documents that actually will look similar from what you've seen up there?
Lucy may be able to talk about, I know that our staff are currently looking at the regional plan with that cross-boundary approach, just to make sure that the policies are all generally aligned. There's some waterways that cross from Otago into Southland, so we need to make sure that that provisions are not going to all of a sudden hit a point and change radically, or then what happens in the Otago region doesn't adversely affect our land and water as it comes through. So we're definitely having a look at that. We haven't yet formulated what our rules are going to look like. We've got a general idea based on the plan that's there now, but it will have to be something that we bear in mind. But we are looking at the plan to make sure that there's no red flags.
Yeah, just very quickly, Chair. So through the Regional Council in Otago are meeting today with their governors to talk about where next, given the government conversations last week at the ministerial level. So we're expecting that we'll be hearing more from both staff and I would imagine in the media about where to next for their water plan, which we're working closely. And as Liz has said, the two teams are meeting tomorrow and talk about that and other things and other opportunities for cross-boundary synergies.
Where do we get to? Sorry. Who was next? Councillor Morrill, and then let's squeeze you in, Councillor Morrill.
Thank you.
Yes, here's my question. My main question is related to the building dam safety regulation and where the level is sitting. Is it structures that are about 4 metres to 3,000 litres, or is it a higher threshold?
There's two, from my memory, there's two different thresholds. So there's a above 4 metres, and then it looks at the quantity of water held behind that. But there's also a above 1 metre and above, and quantity that might be behind that as well. So you may have a 1 metre. Right. I think it's about 40,000.
Yes, it is also get it now.
Yeah, yeah, that's holding that. So it's two different thresholds in terms of height and quantity.
Thanks for that, because we saw one yesterday that would be captured.
Councillor Ronco.
Well, that's exactly the same point. I'm looking at the regulations here, as John is as well. By the way. So it has to be more than 4 metres high and store more than 20,000 cubic metres, which is a big dam. 20,000 cubic metres, 1 metre deep is 200 metres square. Pretty big body of water, or 1 metre high and 40,000. So, that's even a bigger surface area of water. So some of the ones we looked at might reach that, but the vast number of dams on farms wouldn't meet that standard.
Yeah, quick math. If you go to 3.9 metres and you stick to a hectare, you're not going to trigger it.
Thank you. Just before I ask for somebody to move the recommendation, I just wanted to highlight the fact that the private members bill about the quorum via Zoom online attendance is actually really helpful. So if you missed that, that will be in play, I'm guessing, before we know it, which would be great. So somebody to move those recommendations. Thank you, Councillor McLeod. Seconded. Councillor Horrell. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you, staff. And just before I close with the karakia, once again, an apology for the slightly out of kilter start to the day. It's not the way I like doing things at all, so I'm really embarrassed. Anyway, karakia, I know. Give me the sec. Kia whakarea te tapu, kia turuki whakataha ai, kia turuki whakataha ai, kia wātia ai te ara, haumie huie, tai. Kia ora. Thank you, everybody.